Hey everyone. Okay, I am here today with my friend Stephanie Blake. I'm so excited for you to get to meet her. So, before we dive in, let me just introduce you to who she is. She is the founder and CEO of the Simple Business School, which is a membership, and also the Simple Business Suite, which is a customized all in one software for online business owners. And I will tell you a little bit about that later because I actually use that. She is a business coach and productivity expert who helps online business owners, catch this, run simple, streamlined, and profitable businesses. And the best part is she's all about less than 20 hours a week. She has helped thousands of people start and scale their own businesses to reach their unique freedom goals. But she's also a tech nerd, a system strategist, a wife, a mom of two boys, both under 5, and an Amazon Prime addict. So now we know a little bit more about her. So I'm really excited. We do know each other through business, but you guys know this is not a business podcast. So I'm excited because every time we sit down and end up talking about business, we just end up talking about life, momhood, all the fun things. So I have no idea, Stephanie, what question you're going to get on our wheel. But I'm going to pull up our wheel of names and we'll kick it off and see where our conversation leads us. So let me go
Awesome.
ahead and share the screen. I remember when COVID first hit and we started going on to virtual stuff, and I just started using Zoom and all of this. Literally, screen sharing was like my biggest anxiety. And I still get a little twinge of like, can I share the screen correctly? Like, am I going to do this right? All right, we're ready.
This is so fun. I
Let's
love
see
this.
what
I might
comes
steal
up.
this idea from you. This is so great.
All right. What do you think would be different in your life if you were born the opposite gender? Now, this question is
That's
actually from my friend
wow.
Lisa Michelle Smith. And I thought, well, I remember when I read this, I was like, this could be a controversial question in 2004 in light of everything that's going on in the gender world. And we try
Yeah.
to avoid any controversial topics. Um, However, it is interesting to think if I was born a different gender and all the societal norms that come with that, it's kind of irrelevant, but interesting. So that's why I put it on the wheel.
Yeah.
So thank you, Lisa. So yeah, what would you say to that? Have you ever thought
Okay,
about
so
that?
yes, because I have so many different things to talk about here. So, first of all, when I grew up, I was like the biggest tomboy in the world. So, this is probably not a difficult question for me to answer because I would say from like I don't know, as when I could start dressing myself, I don't know, what you're like 4 or 5 until probably late middle school, so like 8th grade, I only wore boys' clothes. That's it. I would
Huh.
not wear girls' clothes, and my mom was not happy about it. I also played a lot of sports, so I think that, like, played along with it. I just wanna be comfortable, like, I don't wanna wear dresses, I don't wanna wear, like, anything else, so, like, I have so many ridiculous pictures of me just wearing boys' clothes all of the time and people just being so confused about why I, like, never wore girls' clothes, and I remember one year, for the entire year, every single day in 6th grade, I wore the exact same red, windbreaker to school, even if it was 90 degrees, and it was a boys, it was not a girls, and I would slick my hair back, like, with gel or grease, let's be honest, because I didn't wanna wash my hair into a ponytail. So, this is probably not the route that you thought this conversation was
Oh my
going to go.
gosh. So, well, this is just so funny because, and again, I want to be careful not to get too controversial. However, with that being said, I do think it's interesting that I wonder in today's environment, if you had done that, what your teachers would have thought or what they would have said, or where maybe they would have pushed you into non-conforming to, oh, maybe she's gender confused or something like that. Because,
Mhm.
my aunt was like that. They used to call my aunt the bully on the block, and she only paid with the boys and she wanted all boy
Yeah.
things. And she didn't think she was a boy. But I often wonder if it was today's world, would that have been like, well, maybe she thinks she's a boy? And I saw an interesting thing actually just yesterday on Twitter. Somebody had posted male privilege is being able to wear the same outfit over and over again to events and not being criticized by that versus like a woman wearing the same dress to an event, to two events would be like ostracized. And a guy wrote back, he was like, that's actually not male privilege. He's like, because the men do not care a rat's ass if you wear the same outfit twice. It's the other women who are going to criticize you. And I thought that's so valid, right?
Yeah.
It's the
Oh my
guy wouldn't
gosh.
even notice. He'd be like, Stephanie, you wore that before? You're like, we're married. I've worn it 10 times. He's like, is that a new outfit? Right.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Where somebody
No, I
else would be
completely agree.
like, she's wearing the same thing. And I thought that's really true. There's a saying, right, that women dress for women, not for men.
Yep. And I dress for myself because I don't care what anybody thinks.
Well,
That's
that's
the
funny
truth.
that I wonder if it's good now that you have 2 boys because
Well,
you were such a tomboy.
yeah, but I forgot to mention this. So I have a lot of brothers too. So I have one, so like I have my full blood brother. I don't know how to say it. It's like my mom and dad had 2 kids, and
Yeah.
I have one brother. And then I also have 4 half brothers who range in age from, so I'm 35 and they range in age from 11 to 23.
Wow.
So, yeah, there's like a very wide gap. So yes, when I say I have an 11-year-old brother, people are also like, "What? How does that make sense?" But so like I grew up and in our neighborhood, it was like all boys too. So I was only playing with boys. Like I said, I was playing sports. So when I was really young, there weren't a lot of girls in our town playing the sports either. So like the soccer team that I was on, the T-ball and coach pitch team and the basketball team, it was all boys. And like I was the only girl. Yeah, it was very interesting.
Well, it's interesting to me that, and I guess in a good way, that your parents didn't have a problem with that. I heard you say, like, my mom didn't really love that, but that they let you play on the all boys
Right.
team and that they didn't say, no, that's a boys thing. I read an article. This is a couple of years ago, but it has always struck with me. It was an article about defining, when you go into a store like Target and they have their toy section, and there's a girls section and there's a boys section. And why are we genderizing? I don't know if that's a word, right? But why are we determining gender based on toys? So if you go in the boys section, there's certain colors, right? There's going to be greens and blues and browns, and it's a lot of, swords and guns and GI Joes, and these are boy toys, construction, things like that. And then you have your girl toys, which are all going to be pinks and purples and dolls and all of that. And they said, and it was such an interesting concept, which I never thought about. They said, as a woman, you want to marry a man who, if you want to have children, is going to be a good father, right? Who's going to be nurturing, who's going to be loving, who's going to be good to your children. Where do women learn how to do that? They learn that from playing dolls as a little girl. You hold your doll, you rock your doll, you nurse your doll, you take care of your doll. And yet we don't want boys to do that. Oh, that's girly, don't do that. But then we want them to grow up to be nurturing men, right?
Yep.
And so the whole concept of this article was we should just get rid of this idea of separating toy sections by gender. We should make all toys equally accessible because you also want a girl who can do construction. I mean, I said this when I owned my house. It was so ridiculous. Anytime anything broke, I didn't know how to fix anything. I had to call somebody and hope that they weren't screwing me over saying, here's the stupid woman who doesn't know that this just really needed one little thing, right?
Right.
Um, you want your girls to play with the tools and the things like that. Um, and yet, so I read this article a few years ago, and I think that makes a lot of sense to me. That makes a lot of sense. Why are we dividing toy sections by girls and boys? And yet now, fast forward, it's 2024, and we're saying, well, if you play with boys' stuff, you must be a boy. If you play with girls' stuff, you must be a girl. And I'm like, well, you can't stand on both sides of the fence, right? Like, which are we on? Are we that we don't have gender neutral toys because girls should be able to play with boys' toys and boys should be able to play with girls' toys? Or is it your toys determine if you're a boy or a girl? Right? Like it's
Right.
such a confusing. I'm like, you can't have both. Which is it? I'd rather be on the side of the fence that you can play with whatever you want. Right? That's
Yeah.
the side of the
Yeah.
fence that I'm going to hang out on.
Yeah, and I mean, this is actually very timely for me because I have a 5-year-old and I have an 18-month-old. And my 5-year-old loves toys, right? Like every child loves toys. And we let him choose the toys that he wants to play with. So for his birthday this year, I took him to Target and I said, "You can go and you can pick out a couple of toys that you want." Like I gave him an amount that he could spend. The toys that he picked out were, have you seen Trolls or do you know of the Trolls
I know the
franchise, the
movie, and I
movies?
think I know that Justin Timberlake sings a song in it, but that's about
He
all
does.
I know
Yeah.
about the
So he's one of the
movie.
main characters. So there's like him, and then there's this girl named Poppy, who is the other main character, and she's like pink and fun and whatnot. So he loves Poppy. He is obsessed with Poppy. So
Oh
the
my gosh, he
toys
has a
that
toll crush.
he does, he really does. Um, and the toys that he picked, it was like 2 dolls from Trolls. They were both pink and yellow, and then this other, like, little microphone that you can sing along with. It's like, I don't know, you remember those, like, old school ones where you could, like, sing in it? And it's like,
Yes.
yeah, it
I
was like
loved
that.
those.
Yes, and that was also pink. And I'm gonna be honest with you, when I saw him pick those up, I almost told him no. And I almost told him no because of all of the societal programming that you're talking about right now. Because I was
Mm.
thinking in my mind, like, what if one of his cousins sees him playing with these dolls or with this microphone? Or
Mm.
like, what if he wants to take it to school for show and share? Like, that's where they can take a school. Like, I don't want people to make fun of him for it. Right. And then
Mm.
I had that thought for about 15 seconds and I was like, no, no, absolutely not. He can have anything that he wants. Like he can have any toy, it doesn't matter what color it is, like he can have anything, right? And then the funny thing is after we got that, he wanted to get a new toothbrush. I was like, "Okay, we'll get a new toothbrush." Guess what toothbrush he picked? A pink poppy toothbrush. So now he has like all of these pink poppy things. And I think it's so great. I think it's so great. And like it was such a learning moment for me to really kind of detach from societal norms um, and just really give him the freedom to choose whatever he wants, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's something that so many people like I can even say like people in my own life, they would not allow their kids to do that much.
Wow.
They're much more old school, so that they would just tell them no, and they would push them to more of the gender neutral or like gender aisles, which is just
Well,
so interesting.
it is because to me, it's not really about the gender, it's about not allowing your child to make their own choices and to say your choice is wrong. So to me, it
Right, it's a
extends
control
far
thing.
beyond, yeah, that it
Yeah,
was about whether it was a girl toy or a boy toy. It's simply that no, you can't have that. What you want is not as important as what I want. Or even worse, what you want is not as important as what other people would want
that's
or
it.
think or
That's it.
say. That
Right.
to me is such we put that in. I deal with adults, right? I coach women all day long and adults who are still so caught up in what will other people think. And I can't pursue
Yep.
my goals and my dreams and things that I want in life because of what my mom's going to think, what my, coworkers are going to think, what my spouse is going to think. And yet you see, where does that come from? It could start with something as small as I picked out this pink microphone and it was wrong and I wasn't allowed to have it. Right?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
keeping future therapists employed down the road,
Right.
right?
I know
My
whenever
mom
I make decisions with whenever I make decisions with my kids, I'm like, "Okay, how can we avoid him bringing this up in therapy down the line?"
Well, I will tell you what has come back to bite me in the butt. So when my daughter was little, she had a very eclectic style, let's say. And she used to dress herself. So, for example, I remember I told her to pick out her outfit for kindergarten that she wanted to wear the first day of kindergarten. And she came back into my room with a full on red velour Beauty and the Beast hooped dress, like a costume. And she was like, I want to wear this the first day of school. And I was like, well, and at the time she was still in a booster seat. I'm like, I don't even think we can get the hoop into a booster seat. So you might need to choose something a little different. But she used to take all of my like big costume jewelry rings and wear them on her little fingers. And she would have purses and things all over her hair. And she had this very unique style. And I always thought it was really important to just let her be her. Like, I didn't
Yeah,
care. I remember calling the kindergarten teacher and I was like, if she shows up with like 17 rings on her hands, I'm just letting her be her. Like, I'm letting her explore who she wants to be and let her dress the way she wants and empower her that she can choose her own outfits instead of dressing her. And so my daughter dressed kind of funky for most of middle school. I would say up until the end of middle school. But now she blames me. She's like, Mom, the reason I was a nerdy, weird kid is because you let me dress like that. And I'm like, I let you dress the way you wanted to dress. And she literally is like, I never would have let my child do that. I would have told them absolutely not. And I would have picked out all the clothes for them. And you should have forced me to dress in style. So it'll be interesting to see what she does to her
yeah,
children, right? Like to see if she has
absolutely.
kids, what she does. But I'm thinking, I was trying to let you be you. And now you're telling me I shouldn't have, which I don't know. In retrospect, I guess my point is like, well, I guess I did a good enough job that you can stand here now and say, and this is what I want and stand on my own 2 feet. And she's a very, like, very assertive, she will tell you like it's straight. And I think, well, maybe if maybe the reason you're so direct is because you got to dress yourself like a weirdo. You know?
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you said that because I had a similar conversation with my mom when I was probably like early 20s, when I was looking back at old pictures where I was like greasy and wearing the same red jacket every
Greasy.
day. I was like, "Mom, like why didn't you like make me change or take a shower or something?" She's like, "I tried. I tried, but like you would not have it. And it was not one of the battles that I was going to pick with you." And that was like one of the
Interesting.
best lessons that I've learned is like pick your own battles with your
Yeah.
kids, right? And yeah, I mean, I would probably, again, just like your daughter, I probably wouldn't be like as assertive or even an entrepreneur, right? If it wasn't for those like little things that in the moment kind of seem like menial, but they do have a much larger impact as your life goes on.
So do you think outside of the growing up and the, nonconformity and being a little bit of a tomboy, do you think that now in your life or in your business that it would be different if you were born as a man? Do you think your life choices would have been different? Do you
Mm.
think you would be treated different?
So this is such I'm like reflecting back on like the experiences that I've had in 35 years over like 2 seconds. And I would say that really the biggest thing that has stood out for me, like I've always been very assertive and whatnot, but for a period between the ages of 17 to 21, I was in an abusive relationship. So I think had I been the opposite gender, I would not have put myself in that relationship. I mean, that's hard to say because I know that
Mm,
I mean, there are like opposite genders. I mean, abuse doesn't discriminate, right? But I feel like if I had not been conditioned to the point where I was conditioned as a female up until that point in my life, I may not have ended up in that relationship.
very
Um,
insightful.
yeah, and that had, I mean, a massive impact on my life in those years, and I mean, until today, it's still, like, trauma that I have to work through and heal from, but that's also made me, like, such an incredible person today. I mean, t truthfully, I think the biggest thing that differentiates men from women other than, like, chemistry, right, like, um, whatnot, is confidence. Real
Mm,
I think that's what people when people think of a man, they think of confidence.
wow.
Like, at least I
Okay.
do.
So
I don't
I'm
know.
I'm curious for anybody who's listening to kind of put in the comments. Number one, do you think your life would be different, or do you think things would be different if you were in the opposite gender? And it'll be interesting to hear how men would respond to that, right? But
Yeah.
when you think of masculinity, do you think of confidence, or what do you think of instead? Um, I will say that I've never thought that thought before, and that's so fascinating to me because one of the things that I work with the most with working with women is building their confidence. One of the
Yeah.
things that we talk a lot about is that confidence will supersede skill. So if you have two people
Mhm.
and they have the same skill set, the person who has more confidence will always go on to do bigger and better things simply because they believe that they can. And
Yep.
most women lack so much confidence. And I've never thought of it as a gender thing, that maybe if I was working with men, they wouldn't have that confidence. It's interesting in business, they've done studies where if you have a man and a woman and they each start their own business and both of those businesses fail, the woman will go, "Oh my gosh, I'm terrible at business. What made me think I could start a business? That was so dumb. I should never start a business." And she will statistically not start another business. The man will turn around and go, "Well, that was a stupid business to start. I'm not the problem. The business is the problem." They completely separate themselves and they go on and start another business. They just go, "Well, that was a poor business to choose." They have no reflection of that. It was they, it reflected them, where women will never look at it that way. They won't be like, "That was a poor business." They'll think, "I am not good at business." So even just that as a gender, I always said, and particularly when the Me Too movement was coming out a few years ago. So I'm 5'10", which I know you can't tell from a camera, but I'm a very large woman. I'm 5'10". And I said, we don't talk about this, but I believe there's height privilege. When I
Yeah.
worked I was a temp for a short time in college where I would work in a temporary office and I worked with mostly men. And I had, that secretary, and this is back in the 90s, right? Like these secretary jobs, um, where, it was like, "Honey, go get me the coffee." Like that was a normal thing to be told, right? Or "Honey, go get me this," or "Honey, go get me that."
Oh,
Uh, But
Just makes me cringe hearing that.
yeah, and I never thought anything of it, right? Like I grew up in a time where I try to explain this to my daughter. I grew up in a time when a man would hug you and you had to learn how to move in a certain way so they didn't kiss you on the lips. Like
Oh
that was
gosh.
just a normal, you just learned that that was part of the real world that you lived in. It never occurred to you to think like there's something wrong with this. Men don't have to do this. Um, but I never really experienced real sexual harassment. And I believe that one of the reasons I was protected from that, even though I was this, young, thin girl, is that I'm so tall. I would wear 3-inch heels. Well, that makes me 6'1". It is very difficult to be condescending to somebody that you're looking up to. The average
Mhm.
man is 5'9" in the United States. So I'm already taller than the average man. Um, it's very difficult to intimidate somebody that you have to look eye level to. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think we talk about height privilege enough, that you're given more respect simply because you're taller. Now we know that men who are over 6 feet are more likely to be CEOs. So we do know there's height privilege for men, but we don't talk about it for women as it kind of protects you even,
I've
simply.
never
Isn't that wild?
thought of that. That is so I'm 5'8". So I'm also, like, on the taller
Mhm.
end, and, yeah, when I would wear heels, I would same thing, I'd probably be, like, 5'10", 5'11", and I now that you're talking about that, I did notice it, and it was especially prevalent, like, especially when I was, like, in my 20s and I would go out, like, to bars and whatever, I would notice and I even asked people straight up, like, "Are you intimidated by me?" Like, of course, I'd have a few drinks in my system, and the vast majority of the men that I talked to said, "Yes." They said, "You have this aura around you that you're not gonna take shit from anybody, and you're also tall." And, like and I'm, like, looking at you eye level just like you said, and I was like, "That is so incredibly interesting because it's not
Yeah.
something that I had thought of before." It's like, "Oh my gosh."
Well, and my daughter
Interesting.
is funny. So my daughter's only about 5'4", and she's a tiny 5'4". Like she's probably 100 pounds sopping wet. Like if you soaked her, right?
Yeah.
Like she's a tiny 5'4". And in my mind, I always pictured she would grow up and eventually become a quote adult size. And when she hit about 15 years old, we were in with her doctor one day, and her doctor was maybe 5'1", like also a tiny 5'1". And we're talking about her height. And we're like, well, when is she going to grow? I mean, I'm 5'10". Her dad is 6'3". Like, I think the shortest person in my family is like 5'7", right? So where did this little tiny 5'4" person come? And the doctor says to her, well, I think you've hit your full height. Like, I guess they can measure that based on like, how old you are and when you got your first period and stuff like that. And my daughter looks at her in a panic and she goes, you mean I'm going to be short forever? And now the doctor is 5'1", right? And 5'4" actually is the average height of a woman in America. And she's like, you're not short. And I'm thinking to myself, I thought she was going to be grown up size. And so I was talking to my sister in law later. Now, my sister in law is about 5'1". And I said to her, I don't know. She might not be like a grown up size. I said, I feel like we shouldn't let her go into like a public bathroom by herself. Is she so tiny? Somebody could pick her up. And my sister in law is like, Tara, I'm 5'1". And I look at her, and for a moment, I had this thought, like, I've never realized that you were that short. Right. And I'm like, well, we shouldn't let you go to the public bathrooms either. I mean, and she was so offended. She was so offended that I was like, wow, I never thought about that because again, just being a tall person, there's a certain level of protection that
Right.
you have as just being a larger human, that I look at her and I go, oh, she's so tiny, but she's really not, right? Like she is I have to like say to myself, she is a full size adult. She's just not looking at you eye level. And now everybody listening to this who's like under 5'10", I have just alienated and offended. But you do live in a different world. I remember being
Yeah.
at a friend's house. They had moved and I was helping her put her kitchen stuff away. And I was putting kitchen stuff, I think, above the stove. And she was like, Tara, you can't put stuff up there. I won't be able to reach it. And I was
Yep.
like, what?
Yeah.
Things you don't think about, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's okay. My mom is 5'3", and it's like whenever I hug her, I have to, like, bend down,
Lean down.
like, put my arms around her, and yeah, no, I get it. It's totally different, and it's just something you don't even think about because you just are that way, and I think going
Yeah.
back to what I was talking about before, like, I've always been taller, like, I think when I was in, like, 5th grade or something, I was already, like, 5'4", 5'6", something like that, so I was already
Oh, wow.
taller. So, like, I was taller than, like, the boys,
So
right?
you were taller than your mom in 5th grade?
Yeah. I was
That must have been strange for her to parent you. Like, I can't imagine looking up at my kid and being like, "Listen, you need to."
yeah. Yeah, yeah, it's so weird. Yeah, everybody in my family is tall except for my mom. So even my husband and I were having this conversation, and I was like, "I don't know how I would be able to date somebody like, shorter than me." Like I've dated somebody who's like my height, and it's like it didn't work. Like there was just something off. And he was like, "Well, you realize that's not easy to find somebody who's like like taller than
Yeah,
6 feet." And I was like,
yeah.
"What are you talking about? Like everybody I know is taller than 6 feet because all of my brothers are like 6'1", 6'2", 6'3". One is
Alright,
six
single
four. So
ladies. Single
right,
ladies. I don't know if they're single, but there you go.
right. And my dad is 6'3", so and my husband he's 6'1". So it's like I've just been
Wow.
surrounded by this my whole life, and I didn't even think about it. He was like, "You realize the average height is like 5'9" for a
Yeah,
man." I said, "You're lying to me. That's that's not true.
yeah. The
There's no way."
Netherlands, I looked it up. The Netherlands have the tallest people on the planet. Because when I was single, I
That's
was
where
like,
his
"I might need
family's
to go
from.
to the Netherlands." To the average height of a woman there, when the last I had read, which was a few years ago, was 5'10", and I thought, "Well, these are my people. I need to go there." And I always wanted to wear heels. Like, I always wore really high heels, so that put me at 6'2". I mean, that dating pool is pretty slim, you know? And I do remember that idea of why wouldn't I date somebody shorter? And I was talking to a friend of mine who is a man who is taller, and I said, "I feel really vain. I feel like I'm a bad person by saying
Yep.
I don't wanna date someone who is shorter than me, and I feel vain, and I feel bad about this." And he had an interesting take that changed the way I thought about it. He said, "It really probably doesn't have to do with anything about their height or your height. It's that when you're with somebody shorter than you don't feel as feminine." And I
Mm,
thought that's true because part of, whether we like to acknowledge or not, I think there is a basic biology of like men protect women. And if I'm with somebody who's significantly smaller than me, I don't feel protected. I don't feel feminine. I don't
for
feel
sure.
that. And so I thought, well, that I never thought about it that way, but there was a lot of truth in that for me, at least. And that may not
Yeah.
be for everybody. I know many women who've married men who were shorter than them. But for me, that really hit home on why I felt uncomfortable. It wasn't really about them. And this is true in everything in life, right? It's really never about, it's never really about us. It's about the other person. It's their issues. It's their problems. It was my problem. It wasn't about the guy. It was my problem. It was my issue. It was my own, stuff that then was being reflected.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I've never thought of it from, like, a feminine perspective, though, but it's definitely a safety thing for me.
Yeah.
That is definitely something because I've tried dating people younger than me. Well, yes, younger than me, but also shorter than me, and when we would go out, it was like, "I have to protect you if something were to happen," you know?
But in
Like
reality, like, when have I ever been protected? Like, where have I ever been that
right,
my partner needed to
same thing.
protect me? It's just a stupid thing in my head that means nothing, but
Right.
I'm like, I guess that's true. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
no, I get that.
Yeah, my high school boyfriend was 5'10". We were the same height, and I do distinctly remember we dated 5 years, and when we broke up, I threw out every single pair of flats I had, and I from that day on, only wore stiletto heels. I was like, "That's it," because I hated that I always could never wear heels, and that if I put heels on, I was instantly taller. So after we broke up, I was like, "That's it. I'm never dating anybody who's, under 6 feet again." I bought all stiletto heels, and I literally wore stiletto heels. I mean, I was pregnant wearing stilettos, and my doctor was like, "You need to get some different shoes on." And I remember walking up and down the aisles at DSW looking at these, either they were flat or they had like a chunky heel, and being like, "I don't want to buy ugly shoes. And I shouldn't have to buy ugly shoes because I'm pregnant." And then when Emily went into the hospital, so for those of you who have not hung around here for a little bit, my daughter's a stage 4 cancer survivor. And so she was in the hospital at 3. I literally was in the hospital in stilettos, and it looked ridiculous. I mean, it looked ridiculous. And that was when I finally broke down and was like, all right, I need to get a pair of sneakers. This is looking ridiculous walking around in my, yoga pants in the hospital.
Right.
And then I crushed my ankle, and now I only wear flats because my ankle never really fully healed. But I go into the stores, I look at those beautiful heels, and I think, oh, I want to be able to wear these beautiful shoes, and I'm reduced to flats.
Yeah, I mean, they are pretty, but I don't wear those anymore. I used to wear them all the
Really?
time, but now I'm like, "Ugh, I prefer comfort."
Yeah, I don't know when that
Comfortable.
happens. Like, at what point do you get to that age where you're just like, comfort will supersede pain? I mean, sometimes I think of the things that I used to wear when we went out and it was cold,
Oh
and
my
you wore like
gosh.
these little tiny dresses and you were
Yeah.
freezing. And
Yeah.
it's like, where do you no longer become like, I don't know if that was that I went from being cool to being really sad or being really stupid to being really smart. I'm not sure which it is. I guess I could see it from
Yeah.
both standpoints.
Yeah, oh my gosh, when I was in my 20s, I would go out in heels, I would go out in, like, little dresses, and I remember New Year's Eve, it was snowing, it was, like we're in Chicago, so it was, like, 30 degrees, less than 30
Yeah.
degrees, and I was freezing my ass off, but I didn't care because I
Yeah.
didn't wanna wear a coat, I didn't wanna
You're
look
like, I look
stupid.
good. I don't care.
Yeah, I was like, "I don't care." But, I think for me, it's kind of, like, twofold for me, actually. So the first was after I had my first son, I was like, my entire life has changed. The last thing that I wanna think about now are the shoes that I'm wearing. Like, all of my focus needs to be put on my child, and I know that people would have differing opinions on that, like, you need to put yourself first, yada, yada. But, I mean, for me, that's really what it was. Like, I wanna make sure that I'm comfortable, so if something were to happen, like, I could take care of my children. But then
Mm,
secondly, when I've done a lot of, like, my own inner work to really just not care what anybody thinks anymore, that was kind of, like, around that same time where I'm like, "If you have a problem with what I'm wearing, that says more about you than it does with me because I don't care
mm.
what anybody else is wearing." Like, I could probably be some days on the People of Walmart website, and I'm okay with it.
Oh my gosh. That is true though. I think as you do, and hopefully this happens for everybody, that you get to a point where you start to care and care less and less about what other people think. And when you get to that point, you just look back, or you like, I look now at my daughter and her friends and I think, wow, I wish you had that now.
Oh my
Life would
gosh,
be
yeah.
so different. Life would be so much easier, if you had that belief at 16, 17, of it doesn't really matter what other people think. And I often think about what choices would I have made differently? What choices would my daughter make differently? What unmet dreams and goals exist in our world simply because people were unwilling to dream them or go for them because of what other people might think.
Oh my
And I
gosh,
bet if you
millions.
had to take like, if you had to write all of those dreams on little pieces of paper, it would fill up oceans of the gifts that we don't have in the world. The inventions, the books, the music, the whatever it is, movies that will be left uncreated because somebody was afraid, what will somebody think of me?
Mhm.
It's so sad. Um,
Yeah.
I know we talk a lot about this. So I think actually this is a good segue into what you do now because you help entrepreneurs pursue their dreams, pursue their goals. I actually met Stephanie. I think we initially met through doing a bundle together. If
Yeah,
I'm
I think last year.
correct, I think it was, yeah, maybe a year or so ago, and we had connected on that and just really liked your energy. I really liked your authenticness. I really liked your heart for wanting to support other entrepreneurs. And I know you have, so for you guys who don't know, Stephanie has a membership that you can join in every month. And I know you give a lot in there and you're giving for anybody who's listening. This is really cool. She's giving a free gift. So you can find out a little bit. I'll have her share a little bit more about that. So you can kind of hear from her and learn from her. But you have a membership to support people who really want to streamline their business to work for under 20 hours a week. But you have
Mm.
something new that you just started that I have been hounding her on. I'm actually using it, so I will plug her while we are here. For those of you who have online businesses or want online businesses, it is overwhelming. Let me just say, when you go and you look at the tools that you need to run an online business, to do effective email marketing, to do effective funnels, to have a website, to have a calendar scheduling app, to have all of these things, a place to host your courses, a place to put your digital products, and then you just type in and Google, like, where could I do this? It is overwhelming the number of places that provide these services, but none of them are connected. And so as I started to piece together where I wanted to have my courses and how I was going to do my email and how I was going to do digital downloads, you don't realize that it's all these small little, oh, it's only this amount, it's only this amount, small dollar points, but they start to add up to be very expensive and very difficult to cohesively connect. And so Stephanie has created this program, and I'll have you share just briefly what it is, but it has allowed me to take all of my disconnected pieces and streamline it into one place that I am so excited about, that I was bugging her on a regular basis to be like, is it launched yet? Is it launched yet? Is it launched yet? Because I have felt that I've been held back on what I want to create or do. And products that I want to have simply because of the tech piece. And so if you are listening to this and you're like, I've wanted to get into an online business, or, oh my gosh, I have all these different software programs and systems I'm using, but everything gives me a headache and it feels overwhelming, definitely check out what you've just launched. So you can explain a little better what it is. I feel like that was a very vague explanation, but I'm just super excited.
Yeah, no. I appreciate that. So the first thing that you were talking about is my membership, the Simple Business School. So I do want to talk about both just so people aren't confused about both of them. So that is where I support entrepreneurs in simplifying their business so they can work less than 20 hours a week. So yeah, that's the membership, simplebizschool.com. But then the software that you're talking about is called the Simple Business Suite. And just like you said, it's an all-in-one tool that allows you to have all of the tech pieces in one place. And just like you, before I created it, I was piecing together all of these different tools. So I'm a very tech savvy person and I always wanted like the best of the best tool. So for example, email marketing, like I had to have the best email marketing tool. And then for my website, I had to have the best website platform. But after 8 years in business, it was getting very overwhelming and frankly really overcomplicated on the back end of my business trying to piece together all of these different tools, and something would break and then we would have to go back and fix it. And I was like, this is not working. Plus I was paying like $1,000 a month for all of these different tools to run together. I was like, this is just not okay. Like I teach people how to simplify their businesses and the back end of mine is like not simple. So I mean, I created this for myself first and foremost. And then once I started telling people about this, like there's this all-in-one tool that you can use to really simplify the back end of your business. Like people were just coming out of the woodwork and
Mhm.
they're like, oh my gosh, tell me more, tell me more, tell
We're
me
like,
more.
we're headed to the promised land. Tell us where it is,
Right.
Steph.
Exactly. Exactly. Because that's something that, again, like I'm really tech savvy. It's very easy for me to set these things up, but I didn't know that so many people struggled with this and they just really needed a simple solution that was kind of like set up out of the box that they can just plug and play with. Right. So that's what the Simple Business Suite is. You can do everything in one place, like your website, your payment collection, your courses, membership, calendar, all of it, SMS messaging, right? Email marketing, all of it in one place for an incredibly low price, too. That was another thing that was also important to me because especially people who are in the beginning stages or like the growth stages of business. And I mean, frankly, if you're scaling your business, you always need to watch your overhead, right? So I didn't want people to feel strapped every month. Like I wanted this to be a non-negotiable expense in your business
Mhm.
because you're paying this one price every month and it's making you so much more on the back end of it.
Well, I will say just from for me personally, so far, and not having utilized all of the features, there's 5 separate programs that I'm able to replace with just this one. And
Yep.
that's 5 separate costs that now I can replace with just one. So that is huge. And the support. And quite openly, guys, also the reason I felt comfortable making that switch was that I've worked enough with you, Stephanie, to know that if there's a problem, if there's an issue, you've got great support. You're going to get back in touch. You're going to be like, how can I make this, work for you? Or let's see what we need to get you. And so having that piece, because sometimes customer service on a lot of these platforms is terrible.
Mhm.
And so that was a huge driving too. So we'll put all of that in the show notes and you guys will be able to find that, learn more about it, check out her membership, do all those things. I know that you have a free gift for our listeners too, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, yeah. Can I share 2 gifts? Are you okay with that?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So I have 2 gifts for you guys. One is a podcast. So unlike this, it's a private podcast. It's called The Simple Business Show. And we talk all about simplifying your business. So it's more focused on business strategy and whatnot, but we also dive into the real life stuff too. That's happening behind the scenes. So it's a mix of both. So I'll give you the link for that. And
Well, and I
Claire's
just
also
want to
going to be a
clarify,
guest.
guys, if you don't know what a private podcast is. So this is normally you have to be a paid subscriber to get access to this podcast. And you guys are going to get access to it for
For
free
free.
as one of our listeners.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. And then I also have a free workshop that dives into the 5-part process that I teach for people who want to simplify their businesses. So if you're listening to this now and you're like, okay, I have this business, but it's kind of like all over the place. Where do I even start? So this workshop will walk you through those pieces as well. It's called the Simple Business Workshop. So if you can't tell, my business is all about simplification.
Yeah, I feel like you should teach a branding class
I,
because
I
her
really
brand
should.
really is all about simple. So just for somebody who's listening, because I know this is not a guys, this is not a business podcast. We don't necessarily talk about business. So if you're listening, like who would be the ideal person who maybe would benefit from these gifts?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are an entrepreneur currently, or if you are even thinking about starting a business, you would definitely benefit from it because the thing that, I mean, I've been in business at this point for 8.5 years. I know you've been in for much longer, but there were so many things in the beginning that I didn't think about and I didn't realize, especially like a lot of the mindset stuff. Like I was just throwing anything at the wall trying to figure out like what would stick. And I really wish I would have had somebody like just sharing the reality of what's going on, what's happening because there's so much out there like in the world. Like people are making all of these claims and saying you can get to like 6 figures in 6 weeks and like all of these really crazy things, right? And it can make you feel really bad about yourself if you don't reach these unattainable goals, right? And that's how I felt for a long time. So because I wasn't reaching 6 figures in 6 weeks, like 99.9% of people, right? So
Yeah.
that's that's why I created the podcast specifically to just kind of give a real look at what it's like to run a business. Like it's a true behind the scenes look. So like I said, you're getting the real stuff, the real nitty-gritty stuff that people aren't talking about, plus the actual strategies that you can implement to start to see results.
Yeah, we could do a whole other episode about the fake social media lies that we see as business people. I
Yep.
mean, I have seen everything where if you don't know the backstory, just some examples. I know people who came from other businesses that had huge followings, huge contact lists, started a new business, did a launch with all of these contacts that they had, and then say, oh, my first launch was $100,000. And you would never know that their first launch involved thousands of contacts that they had from a previous business. I've also seen people talk about how, oh, my first launch was $100,000, and they leave out the interesting part that they spent $95,000 on Facebook ads, right?
I see that a lot.
So
And another
that
big
is,
one, can I just like
yeah,
throw it in the ring? So this is the one that like really grinds my gears. Is when, people will talk about simplifying their businesses. They're like, "Oh, I have all of these systems in place. I have all of these processes in place. Like, that's how I'm able to work so much less." But then you actually have a conversation with that person, or you, like, literally see what's happening behind the scenes of their business, and you were like, what are you talking about?" Like, there is nothing streamlined here. Like, I know for a
mm,
fact that you are just straight up lying right now because there are no processes in place. Like, your team has to be working 24/7. So even if it's not you doing the work, it's highly likely that your team members are running into the ground because, like, there is nothing streamlined in the back end of
yeah,
your business.
yeah.
So, yeah,
And
another.
I mean, I own a business, and I've had a business for 26 years. And anybody who thinks that there's overnight success is looking to, it's not winning the lottery, right? There is no overnight success. Anybody who has a legit business that not only makes money, but that has continued to make money, because I've also seen this too. I've seen people be able to come in, start a business, do well for a short period of time, but it's not sustainable. And when I was looking for mentors early on in my career, I always looked for mentors who not only got to the level I wanted to be at, but they were able to sustain that, because those
Mhm.
are two different things.
Yep.
And I have seen a lot of that. And it's very interesting that people can post anything they want on social media about their quote results with with nothing to back it up, with no proof.
Mhm.
And people like to post things, and I'm such a cynic in that people will even show like screenshots, and I'm like, did you make that on Canva? you know,
Did you
what
Photoshop that?
did you Photoshop that? Exactly, because and particularly now with AI, I mean, you know, just because you see something, we don't it used to be if you see it, you can believe it, right? And now we
Oh,
live
that's
in a
true.
world where that's no longer even true. Just because you see something doesn't even mean that it's real. And I think that's a scary world, quite openly, that the door that we have opened to a scary world where you can no longer even believe your eyes.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, 2020, there was just that brought an influx of new entrepreneurs in who, like you said, are just making money really quickly. But I can count, like, on 2 hands the number of people who are no longer in business after that,
Wow.
like, that influx came in. And even people who I knew started before that, they they are also out of business from their own choosing because of burnout. Because like you said, it's
Yeah.
not set up to be sustainable. And I mean, truthfully, I almost reached that point in the beginning of my business too, because I was working 80 to 100 hours a
Yep.
week. And then
I was in the same
I
place.
got pregnant. Yeah, and then I
Yep.
got pregnant and I was like, "Okay, I can't do this anymore because I my baby and I will end up in the hospital." So that's kind of when I was forced to like change everything, you
Yep.
know?
I actually had one of the things that I had to do early on in my business because I do think this that when you love what you do want to do it all the time.
Yes.
Right? Particularly if you're an entrepreneur and you love what you're building and you love hitting goals and you're working and you're on fire. It wasn't like, "Oh, I hate doing this. I loved doing it, but I couldn't turn it off." So I will give you a quick tip as we wrap up. This is what it is. Stephanie, we can talk all day. This is why I was like, you have to be a guest because we can talk all day about stuff. Um, I actually printed out. Now, this is really embarrassing. This is how old I am. It was on Publisher. So it was clip art from Publisher. Okay. There was no Canva. There was anything like that. It was clip art where you had to clip a piece of like really
Yep.
creepy looking clip art. And I printed out a picture of a light switch and I printed it on just a plain piece of white paper. And it was a picture of just a light switch. And I stuck it on my door that was the door to my office. And it was a signal to me in my brain that when I opened the door, I was turning it on and I was going to be on and I was going to be focused and I was going to be working. But as soon as I closed that door, I had to turn the light switch off. I had to switch off my brain. I had to switch off that I was not going to think about business anymore. And I had to be present with my daughter, with my family, with whatever was going on, because otherwise I struggled with this on and off. And it
Mhm.
was I heard a guy use during COVID, which I thought was a great idea. He and his wife, they worked from home. They got crowns, like king and queen
Yeah.
crowns, and they wore them when they were working remote. And it was a signal to the children that those were their concentration crowns.
Oh my
And
gosh, I
so
love
if
that.
mom and dad were wearing your concentration crowns, and I can't remember the guy who shared this, that they couldn't be interrupted. But I also thought that's a great signal that when you take that off, it's kind of a physical reminder to your brain, I'm no longer working.
Yeah.
Right? I'm no longer
Yeah.
working. I have to be able to turn it on and off. And I teach all new entrepreneurs this that if you do not learn how to turn it off, you will burn out. End of
Mhm.
story, no exception. You have to learn how to turn it off. Now, how long you turn it off is different for different people and their goals. But if you don't, or your family will hate you. You know?
Right. Oh my gosh. This is something I could talk about. Again, we can do like another episode just on this because that's it. Like that's truly it. Like you are going to if you continue going at that pace, you're going to ostracize yourself. Like I was reading this book. It's called I have to find it. Something about like being a workaholic. Like Chained to the Desk, I think is the name of it. And in it he talks about the increasing number of divorces on the rise from people who like consider themselves workaholics because they put that
Wow.
above anything else. Like their kid's baseball game, "Oh, I can't be there because 'cause I'm working." Right? But it's also such a hard thing for people to disconnect from because when you're thinking about addiction in general, like for example, like an alcoholic, right? Like you can say you don't need to drink that alcohol, like your body does not need that, but you need to work to make money.
Yeah.
So, like, it's so much harder for people who, like, identify as workaholics, and even if you don't identify, if you just notice yourself working constantly, to really disconnect from that because you can just convince yourself that you need to be doing this to support yourself, your family, and whatnot. But the reality is, you are so much more productive and so much more profitable when you are working less because that's in those moments of not working, that's where those really big, like, exciting and brilliant ideas come in that will like 5 or 10x your productivity and your revenue.
Yeah. And I will say as a parent who's a single parent and has supported my daughter pretty much on my own her whole life, I can really resonate with that. It's a fear
Yeah,
of not working,
yeah,
right? There
it
is
is.
no yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and I'm the sole breadwinner, my husband doesn't work anymore. I retired him, and I thought that I had gotten, like, through all of that, but then when he left his job, like, all of those fear-based things were coming up. It's like, "We don't have the safety net anymore," like, "I'm responsible for everything." So, I would slip back into those workaholic tendencies because, like,
yeah.
that's what I did. So, it's very hard.
Yeah.
It's
It
very
almost
hard to
when you say
overcome it.
that, I almost picture it feels like a fake safety net.
Does.
You
Yeah.
feel like it's a safety net, but it's really not. So maybe we'll have to have you come back on and we'll discuss all of those things. They're
Yeah.
not irrelevant, actually, not irrelevant at all. They're very relevant questions, but I enjoy the irrelevant questions. Um, and I guess as we end, think how different would this episode be if we were both men? What would
Right?
we have
I know.
talked about? Where would that have gone? And what would we have not talked about had we been men? Uh, so interesting thing to leave you with. If you were in the opposite gender, how would you show up in the world? And maybe there might be some good things that you could take from that, from either a man or a woman, right? Because we both have strengths in our own gender. So where could you take some of the strengths that men have, like Stephanie brought up, confidence, and start to take that and put that into your own? For men, we know that women are really, really good at connection and community. And those are assets and strengths. And so, where can you take that? And be the best version of who you are by taking a little bit of both your masculine and your feminine energy.
Yeah.
So, thank you guys for being today. I will put in the show notes all of the links so you can find Stephanie. You can check out her podcast that she's giving you to try for free. You can check out her class on your 5 steps. If you liked the episode today, then please subscribe. And of course, we would love a review. If you didn't like it, you don't need to leave a review. And then if you did love us, join us next time for another interesting person with another irrelevant conversation. And we all do this why? Because life is worth laughing at. Have a great day, everybody.